You know what no one talks about enough? The moment after the avoidant pulls away. See, the avoidant isn't heartless. They're not cold. They're not incapable of love. In fact, most avoidants feel deeply, so deeply, it scares the hell out of them. So they run, they detach, they say, I need space, or I'm not ready, or you deserve better. But here's what nobody sees: the instant regret. Not weeks later, not months later. It happens the moment they realize the person they pushed away stopped chasing. It's that stomach drop feeling when they see you not calling, not texting, not begging them to stay, when you go quiet, when you stop fighting for them. And here's the twist. It's not because they suddenly figured out they want you back. It's because losing your presence confronts them with a truth they've worked their whole life to avoid. Maybe I wasn't protecting myself. Maybe I was sabotaging something real. See, avoidants regret not the space, but what the silence means. It means you respected yourself enough to walk, that you chose peace over confusion, that you refused to shrink yourself to earn their comfort. And for the avoidant, that's devastating. Because in the absence of your voice, your laughter, your loyalty, they don't just miss you, they're faced with the haunting truth. I pushed away the one person who would have stayed. So here's what you need to know. If someone pulls away, don't fill the space they created. Let them feel it. Let them see the cost of their distance, because that silence, that's not punishment, it's power. Avoidants are often misunderstood. On the surface, they seem distant, cold, or uninterested. But what most people don't realize is that many avoidants actually feel emotions more intensely than they're willing to admit, even to themselves. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring feels dangerous. Connection feels threatening, not because the other person is unsafe, but because emotional intimacy activates fears they've carried for a long time. Somewhere along the way, often in childhood or early relationships, they learn that closeness can lead to pain, disappointment, or loss of control. So they built walls not out of malice, but out of survival. These walls aren't always obvious. Avoidants might still flirt, open up in moments, even say they love you. But when things start to get too emotionally close, when you become someone who sees them, someone who understands them, someone who genuinely wants to connect, they retreat. Sometimes it's subtle, they pull back slightly, delay responding, find reasons to be busy. Other times it's dramatic, disappearing, starting fights, or ending things abruptly. Retreat isn't about you. It's about their internal alarm system telling them intimacy equals danger. This fear of intimacy isn't always rational, but it's real. The deeper someone gets into their heart, the more exposed they feel. Vulnerability for the avoidant isn't just uncomfortable. It feels like a threat to their identity and autonomy. They're used to self-reliance, used to control, and when someone else's love starts to break through those defenses, it can feel like chaos. Even if they want love, the part of them that's terrified of being hurt screams louder. What makes this even more complicated is that avoidants don't always recognize this dynamic consciously. They might believe they're simply not feeling it anymore, or that something's wrong with the relationship, when in truth, it's the activation of their own attachment fears. The closer you get, the more their instinct is to flee. Not because you did something wrong, but because intimacy feels like a trap they're trying to escape. This is why avoidance can seem so confusing. One moment they're affectionate, vulnerable, and engaged. The next, they're distant, critical, or gone. It creates a push-pull pattern that leaves their partner feeling confused and rejected. But beneath it all is often a very sensitive person, deeply afraid that real closeness will expose them to rejection, engulfment, or the kind of emotional pain they've tried their whole life to avoid. The moment an avoidant realizes the person they pushed away has stopped chasing is when regret hits the hardest and the fastest. It's not a slow burn of realization weeks down the line. It's immediate. That feeling comes in like a wave. The second they notice the shift, you're not trying anymore. You're not texting to check in. You're not asking what went wrong. You're not trying to fix things. And that silence, that lack of pursuit is deafening to someone who's built their identity around emotional distance. Avoidants are used to being the one in control of the emotional dynamic. When they create space, they expect you to close the gap. When they back away, they assume you'll reach forward. That chase gives them a sense of safety. It affirms that they're still wanted, still desired, still important, without having to get too close. But when that pattern breaks, when they create distance and you don't try to close it, they feel a kind of panic they're not prepared for. That panic isn't always dramatic. It might show up as a restless feeling, an urge to check your social media, a spike of irritation or confusion about why they haven't heard from you. But beneath it all is one powerful, unspoken fear. What if I miscalculated? What if they're really gone? It's not just about missing your presence. It's about realizing they're not being chased anymore. And that might mean they've finally pushed you too far. This moment is so triggering for avoidance because it shatters the illusion of emotional safety they've constructed. They believe they could pull back without consequence, that their absence wouldn't be final because you'd be there, waiting, ready to try again. But your stillness, your silence, your decision to protect your peace, it creates a vacuum they didn't, and into that vacuum rushes regret. They regret the timing. They regret their words. They regret the withdrawal, not necessarily because they suddenly feel differently, but because the security of your love, your energy, your pursuit is no longer guaranteed. It's in that quiet space they start to feel the full weight of what they may have lost. Not because you begged, but because you didn't. Not because you made a dramatic exit, but because you let go with dignity. And that absence, your absence, triggers something even deeper. It forces them to see that they may have been running from the very thing they secretly wanted, but were too afraid to hold. When an avoidant starts to feel regret after someone walks away, it's easy to assume they want the relationship back, but that's rarely the full truth. What they're reacting to isn't always love or a renewed desire for connection. It's what the silence represents. It's the shift in energy, the loss of being prioritized, the realization that your presence wasn't permanent. They don't just miss you, they miss what you being there said about them. Your loyalty was a mirror reflecting back a sense of value and significance. When you stop showing up, that mirror vanishes. And with it, the comfort of being someone worth chasing for. Avoidants often thrive in dynamics where the other person takes on the emotional labor. As long as you're reaching out, forgiving and trying, they can stay in a space where they don't have to face their deeper fears. But the second you pull back, you flip the script. They're no longer the one in control, and suddenly they're confronted by what your silence means. You've accepted their decision, you've stopped fighting, and you're no longer available to absorb the emotional tension for them. That's a sharp and destabilizing realization. It's not about wanting you back so much as wanting back the emotional safety net your presence provided. When you were still there, even when things were shaky, they could pretend that nothing was really at risk, that you'd always come back, that even if they pulled away, the dynamic would remain intact. But when you stop reaching out, you showed them something they didn't anticipate. Your love wasn't unconditional in the way they assumed. It had limits, and those limits were based on self-respect, not bitterness. It's in that silence they start to project meaning. They wonder what you're doing, who you're talking to, if someone else is stepping into the space they used to occupy. It's not always rooted in missing you as a person. It's often rooted in discomfort with being the one left behind that triggers a sense of failure, of having lost control, and of being exposed emotionally in a way they were trying to avoid from the start. So while the avoidant may reach out, test the waters, or express remorse, it's crucial to understand what's driving it. Often, it's not a clear realization of love. It's a confrontation with the consequence of distance, the silence that speaks volumes about your strength, your standards, and your willingness to stop participating in a cycle that left you empty. When an avoidant pulls away from someone they care about, they often convince themselves it's the right decision. They tell themselves they need space, that they're better off alone, or that the connection was becoming too much. In the moment, the withdrawal feels like self-protection, but underneath that retreat is a deeply ingrained pattern, the habit of self-sabotage. And most of the time, they don't even realize it's happening. They think they're escaping discomfort, but what they're really doing is pushing away the very thing they want: closeness, love, and emotional security. Avoidants tend to struggle with internal contradictions. They crave connection, but fear losing themselves in it. They want love, but associate intimacy with vulnerability and pain. So when someone gets too close, their nervous system interprets it as a threat. Even if that person is safe, respectful, and genuinely loving, that fear activates old defense mechanisms, shutting down, creating distance, or manufacturing reasons to leave. In their mind, they're protecting themselves. But what they're really doing is sabotaging something meaningful before it has the chance to deepen. The moment regret sets in, when they realize the person they pushed away isn't coming back, it's not just a fear of loss they feel. It's a recognition, sometimes subtle and sometimes overwhelming, that they may have acted against their own best interest. Maybe the person they distanced themselves from wasn't suffocating or unsafe, but instead someone who genuinely saw and accepted them. And the hard truth begins to set in. Their behavior didn't just protect them from pain, it may have also cost them something real. This internal conflict can be difficult for avoidants to process, because admitting they're sabotaged a good thing means facing their own emotional patterns. It means realizing that their instinct to flee wasn't wisdom, it was fear. And that fear drove them to push away someone who was showing up for them in ways they've always secretly longed for. But recognizing self-sabotage requires a level of emotional awareness that many avoidants are just beginning to develop. In that recognition lies a complicated regret, not just about losing someone, but about the part of themselves that still doesn't know how to feel safe in closeness, that still believes leaving first is better than being left. And while the person they walked away from may have already moved on, the avoidant is left wrestling with the truth that can't be ignored. The pain they were trying to avoid didn't disappear. It followed them. Because what they were really running from wasn't the other person, it was themselves. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls away, the natural response for many partners is to chase, to explain, to fix. There's a deep fear of loss that kicks in, a fear that if you don't do something, they'll disappear forever. But the truth is, the most powerful response isn't to run after them. It's to pause. Is to let them have the space they asked for without resistance or protest. That silence, that decision to stop filling the space they created, isn't weakness, it's strength, it's self-respect. And for the avoidant, it's often the first moment they truly feel the weight of their own distance. Avoidants are used to people bridging the gap for them. When they step back, they expect others to lean in. That dynamic has worked for them in the past. It allows them to maintain emotional distance without ever having to face the full consequence of their withdrawal. But when someone chooses not to chase, it breaks the cycle. It flips the emotional script. Suddenly, they're not the one pulling the strings. They're the one sitting in the silence, wondering what happened. And that silence, it becomes a mirror. One that reflects back the cost of their behavior. In that quiet, they start to ask questions they've avoided. Did I push too far? Did I mistake fear for intuition? Did I just lose someone who actually cared? These aren't easy thoughts to sit with. They're uncomfortable, but they're necessary because growth doesn't happen when people are constantly rescued from their patterns. It happens when they feel the consequences of them. And your decision to hold your boundary, to not beg, not explain, not chase, gives them the chance to actually confront themselves. This doesn't mean you're punishing them. It means you're protecting your peace. You're refusing to abandon yourself just to make someone else feel safe in their avoidance. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. You show that your love isn't something that can be taken for granted, that your presence isn't guaranteed when you're being treated like an option. And for someone with avoidant tendencies, who's used to emotional pursuit, that quiet strength hits harder than any words ever could. Silence, when rooted in self-respect, becomes a message they can't ignore. It says, I cared, but I care about myself too. And in a world where many people chase to prove their worth, choosing to stay still becomes the most powerful move you can make. So if you're someone who's loved an avoidant, or maybe you are the avoidant, here's the truth. Regret doesn't wait. It doesn't come later when the dust settles. It shows up the moment real love goes quiet. When the person who used to reach out stopped. When the space you asked for turned into a space you can't fill again. Avoidants don't always regret the distance they created. They regret realizing, too late, that someone was willing to stay until they weren't. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that pattern, let this be your reminder. You don't have to fight to be seen. You don't have to chase clarity. Your silence is not empty. It's powerful. It speaks the language of self-worth louder than any plea for love ever could. Let them feel the silence. Let them come to their own truth. And in the meantime, choose you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up, not just for others, but for yourself. Until next time, take care of your heart and protect your peace. Goodbye for now.